Welcome, everybody, to Insights with C5 Insight. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Boolean fields. Okay, so I don't know about the rest of you, but Boolean fields, what's also called the two-option set, I think I consider it a very controversial field to use. And I believe we had talked about this briefly a couple times, and we were like, "Hey, this would be a great thing for insights." So why don't we chat it out? So, who has some thoughts about booleans?
I do. I have
Excellent.
I have real life. I literally had this debate with myself today, quite literally turning myself this way and that way as I debate this out, as I sit here working on something. So, and this happens all the time. So we're starting to build out a form, and we know the value quite literally is it's yes or no. It's one or the other. It's whatever the two options are. Those are the only options.
Mutually exclusive.
And pardon?
Mutually exclusive.
Yeah, and so the logical thing would be to put the Boolean in there.
Mhm.
And then inevitably the customer or even our own selves in our own work are going to say, well, that data is really important. We better make it required. Well, therein lies one of the challenges, right, with the field. Sure, make it required. It doesn't do anything because it's always got a value. So other than forcing somebody to look at the red asterisk, which I can appreciate for some people might be enough, but in my opinion, it's not. It's not enough to see the red
No.
asterisk and make me think about it, because I'm going to look at that 3 times and then I'm probably never going to think about it again.
That's right.
Because the reality is it contains a value, therefore I'm not going to get prevented from moving on. So not going to deal with it. So then I think, okay, great. I better use a choice field with a yes, no option, but the option for blank value in there. And that seems to work great. But every time I run into a scenario with a yes, no situation, I seem to pause and think about this debate. And makes me wonder if I'm right or if I'm wrong or what different perspectives are. So I know that's part of what gave rise to this topic today was our ongoing, because to your point, we've had this conversation before. So that's one thought that I had on the matter.
And I think it's an interesting point about the idea it's always populated. I was looking actually today as well at some field attribute usage using some handy XRM toolbox tools, and helping clients make decisions about what fields to keep on forms, for example. And so if you look at those field attribute usage, those Booleans are going to say 100% used. They should stay on your forms. Obviously, people are using them, but that's not true necessarily. It will just be populated with something that doesn't necessarily mean it should or should not remain on a form, for example. So I think you should be thinking, is this actually just a yes or no, or is there another consideration to make? Maybe it's the option set with the third, NA or whatever it might be. But I think that's another consideration, is it's always going to appear as fully used, 100% usage, but is it?
Because it always has a default value.
Exactly.
Yep.
Whether it's 0, false, or no, or whatever your labels have become.
And I know that one of the visually, you can do some really cool things with them. They show up really nicely if you're using the slider. You can do the checkbox, the toggle. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I know that visualizing the data is one of the many reasons we do the different things that we do, right? And I know that to that point, I think Patrick, you or Malcolm found some PCF controls that allowed you to do something similar.
Yeah.
With
you can have some nice
sets.
icons and graphics, and it lights up or it doesn't, change the color, it doesn't. So there's some really great visualizations around that for user things. But if it's for some sort of field requirement, forget it. Yeah. Unless you're using it in a business process.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
We've talked about that before too, that is the one use case that we can think of where requirement can help us out, since the business process flows, the BPFs, will prevent users from advancing if you've got a Boolean that is required there. It has to be true or yes or marked complete or whatever your label says. before you can advance to the next stage. So that's the one use case, and doesn't have to be on the form to be in the BPF. So that's a use. I know that I've used it in other situations for kicking off or firing a classic workflow back in the day, or Power Automate flow today. So they can serve that purpose, and even have the flow flip it back to the off position after it's completed its process, so it can be reused in the future. Yeah, we were trying to think of some good use cases for when can we use them that it makes sense.
Well, your BPF piece raises an interesting point too, because we had a scenario not long ago, I think one of the first times we started this whole conversation a while back, where the request was, should be a Boolean field. They wanted it required, but the information, they wanted it required because they wanted the person to interact with the field. But in the context of the BPF, it had to be yes. And they said, well, sometimes the answer is no. So we just want them to make sure that there's a value in there, and they have to look at that field and make sure that they've made a determination. But we had to change course on that because that piece of the requirement came out. We can't put it as a required in the BPF because you only have the yes option. Otherwise, you're prevented from moving forward, as you said. So that just adds to the things you need to think about and all the questions that come up when somebody says, oh yeah, it's just yes and no. It's a A or B or yay or nay or whatever. So,
and in that use case, I mean, it didn't matter if it was yes or no. They just needed an answer.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, and that's where like Emily, you kind of alluded to it too, right? The NA, no and yes, or yes or no, or even just a choice with yes and no, but you can have blank. And so the blank is the default value. And so then you say, make that required, forcing them to pick something, yes or no, but default doesn't actually count. And or default equals blank, which doesn't count. So they have to pick yes or no. And in that scenario, that's what fixed that problem. They were like, yeah, that's perfect, because we need them to say yes or no. I don't care which one. We just need to know the answer to that thing, and we want it to be required. So that worked great in that scenario. But there's you had said you were trying to think of all the positive uses, and I'm fully acknowledge that I'm a little bit jaded on them. So I struggle with what positives are you talking about?
Right.
Yeah, any scenarios where it truly is, if it's a yes or no, like I guess the kind of maybe concept of a checkbox. Maybe those scenarios where could it be a checkbox or should it be a checkbox? Like, yes, this is a not bad example because you wouldn't necessarily use this field, but like opting into something or confirming approval, like approvals, those sorts of things where you do need it to be just truly no, this has not happened, or yes, it has happened. That's sort of the way I like to think of them, and maybe use cases for it. But yeah, I'm more in agreement with Malcolm on this one, I think.
Well, and the use case that came up today was this idea of the section is called project scope, and it's all these things, and it's like, what of these things applies to this project that we're doing? And it quite literally is just check off the ones that you want, and that's how the requirement was described. So that implies, okay, great, we'll do a checkbox. So it's two options. But again, that fear in the back of my mind that they're going to come back and be like, actually, well, we need these ones to be required. Now the conversation looks very different. So, but I will admit, after hearing different perspectives today, okay, fair enough. I'm jaded on it, but maybe I'm coming around a little bit. There have been a couple of things in this very short discussion that I'm like, okay, fair. Maybe that would be a good use for that field. But I'm still camp choice versus Boolean.
Yeah,
but maybe I'm coming around a little bit. But you got more convincing to do.
Yeah, well, and I don't even want to change your mind, because I think we're all riding the same train together on that. It's they're so easy to set up, and for a lot of system admins out there, and I was that person back when I was new in the environment of, oh, of course, this perfectly fills the need, and it just, until you start scratching the surface and asking more questions, like, is there ever going to be a time when it needs to be required? You don't want an answer selected yet. Yeah.
Interesting. It's an interesting discussion.
Highly customized uses, and I don't think we should be using them as frequently as some of our clients do.
That's fair. Yep, entirely fair. Well, we'd love to hear or see in the comments what you guys do at, our viewers. What do you think about the Boolean? Is it a useful thing? Drop your use case scenarios, help change our mind perhaps, and help us kind of understand different perspectives, which we always
Good
love to do.
luck.
Yeah. Good luck. Yeah. Yeah. If you haven't been able to tell, we're a little bit stuck in the mud on it, but it's always good to entertain different things. It's part of why we wanted to talk about it today. And if you're interested in kind of thought leadership scenarios like this, you'll notice Paige and Patrick both have great backgrounds. Emily and I are supposed to have those on, and we don't. Sorry. But you can see the Leadership Summit coming up on the heels of the DynamicsCon live conference in May of 2024. So we would love to see you there, May 16th and 17th in beautiful Denver, Colorado. If you're interested in that, you can see the website behind their banner. Please visit it and look into it. If you're curious about more information, please email any one of us, reach out to C5. We'd be happy to chat with you about what it's all about, what you could expect, and why you should be there. So thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on Insights with C5 Insight.